My name is Devin Weymouth.
And I'm Haley Forsberg, and we're going to be talking about the Singapore education system. So Singapore is located on the southern tip of the Malay Peninsula in Southeast Asia, between the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. Education in Singapore is very serious. It starts at a very young age from preschool. This is a 3-year system where kids have 1 year of nursery school and 2 years of kindergarten. Here is where they learn their basic social skills, speaking, listening. They also start to learn basic reading and writing skills, and they begin their education in a second language. Primarily, that language tends to be English. Once they exit their primary kindergarten school, they enter primary school. So this is where they hone in on their basic reading and writing skills. They develop those skills, making them much more advanced than they were in kindergarten. They also develop a greater understanding of English. They will also learn to read and write in English, and they develop a deeper understanding of their native tongue. So everything they do is either in English or in their native tongue. Once they exit primary school, they begin their journey in secondary school. This is when they have to kind of decide what they want to do in life. By the time a Singapore student is 12, he or she normally knows what career path they want to go on. So secondary school, they can go to a school specifically for what they want to do. It's specialized education depending on their skills and their interests, and there's a school specifically for that. Singapore schools are highly exam-based. So teachers are teaching to a test that they take at the end of the year. Students are expected to become masters at the subject they are learning. Everything they do is specifically to learn a specific skill that they will be able to use on the test at the end of the year. It's very competitive in Singapore. Parents spend an average of $200 to $400 a month on outside tutoring for their children. In 2000, it was estimated that parents spent over $320 million on extra classes for their children. So parents are really invested in their kids' education, and students are really invested in their own education.
So now I'm going to be talking about educational equity, which is the traditional Singaporean educational model, which includes mostly highly intelligent students. So the more intelligent the student is, typically the higher they score on the national tests, and then they normally fare better in Singaporean society because they place such a huge emphasis on education. They have more opportunities once they reach that secondary level to get into a college, or to then be able to go to a school that they want and continue to become specialized in a skill, which gives them greater mobility versus students that traditionally score lower on those national exit tests and exams. They typically don't fare as well. They may be limited to a technical school. They may be excluded from certain colleges altogether. So their resources is greatly limited. So this is why there is such a sense of competition within the Singaporean education system, which unfortunately tends to favor those that are either very intelligent or have the economic means to benefit from the system. And the students that don't score quite as high may be very limited. Now I'm going to talk about educational access and culture. Access is affected by two things, primarily economics and intelligence. Objectively, all Singaporean students can obtain a preschool, primary, and a secondary education, but access to college and further specialization can become limited if the student does not score very high on those tests. And parents who can afford the extra tutoring and to pump tons of money into their students' education, that will increase that student's access to an education. Special needs students are typically excluded from the general curriculum. There are roughly about 20 specialized schools for special needs students throughout Singapore, and they are only designated to those schools. And they're generally overlooked from the general population because this is a culture that prides itself on education, and so they are often excluded from that process. Lastly, I'm going to talk about educational diversity. Students learn both English and their native tongue, beginning in preschool and continuing throughout the primary years. In recent years, there has been some initiatives in the Singaporean government to widen the curriculum. Instead of being so test-based and test-oriented, it's more project-based learning in recent years. There's been a push to include things like critical thinking, creativity, all of those big C's that are being pushed in the American U.S. system. So there's more initiatives to enrich students in other pursuits besides just academics. And this is also because of the high stress that has been constantly put on the students. In addition, there's about 8 Singaporean universities at this point that have widened the applicant pool that was formerly limited, and students that didn't fare as well on tests had no chance on getting into these schools, so they have now widened that applicant pool, and so that we see more of a diverse student body as a result, and students have more different modes of intelligences than just the kids that can score high on an exam. Now kids can do well in art, they can do well in music, they can do well in drama and communication skills, and still be able to have an outlet.
Lastly, education is so valued in Singapore that teachers are just as highly valued in Singapore. In the education system, teachers make more than doctors, and the requirements to become a teacher are very strenuous. It's very hard to become a teacher in Singapore, and that the sole reason is because they value education so greatly. So, now that we've talked a little bit about Singapore education, your task for tonight to bring back to class tomorrow is to find something that represents education in the United States, something that you think represents your education and what we do here in the States. So I want you to find something that you can bring to class tomorrow, and if you cannot absolutely find anything to bring to class, give me a brief explanation of what you think defines education in the United States.